The rain in Atlanta does not wash things clean. It just makes everything heavy. It makes the red Georgia clay stick to your heels like a bad reputation. It makes the black wool of a morning dress smell like wet dog and old sorrow. I stood there watching the first shovel of dirt hit the mahogany casket, and the sound was a dull, hollow thud that echoed in the empty space of my chest. That sound was the final period at the end of the only sentence that had ever made sense in my life. Dante Reynolds was gone. My husband, my partner, the only man who had ever looked at me and seen Jasmine, not just the disappointment of the Reynolds family dynasty. I looked around the cemetery. It was a sprawling, historic place where the city's old money rested under marble angels and weeping willows. I had paid extra for a plot near the oak tree because Dante loved the shade. I had paid for 50 white folding chairs. I had paid for the satin covers to keep the dampness off the seats. I had paid for 50 programs printed on thick cream-colored cardstock with gold lettering. And there they sat. 50 empty chairs arranged in perfect accusing rows. The rain beaded on the white satin, looking like tears the chairs were crying on behalf of the people who refused to show up. Not a single person. No aunts, no uncles, no cousins. Not my father, who always claimed family was the cornerstone of success. Not my mother, Patricia, who would never miss a photo opportunity unless the subject of the photo was something she was ashamed of. And certainly not Ebony, my younger sister, the golden child, the sun around which my parents orbited. The pastor, Reverend Miller, was a kind old man with a voice like gravel and honey. He cleared his throat, his eyes darting nervously to the sea of empty seats. He looked pitying. I hated that look. I did not want pity. I wanted witnesses. I wanted someone else to see that Dante was a good man, a brilliant man, a man who deserved more than a solitude funeral in the rain. Reverend Miller closed his Bible. "Jasmine," he said softly, ignoring the awkwardness of the situation. "Is there anyone else we are waiting for?" He knew the answer. I knew the answer. The two grave diggers leaning on their shovels a few yards away knew the answer. "No, Reverend." I said, my voice sounding strange and tinny in the open air. "Just us. Just me." I pulled my phone out of my clutch. It was a reflex, a desperate, pathetic hope that maybe there had been a traffic jam. Maybe a bridge had collapsed. Maybe a sinkhole had swallowed the entire interstate. Any disaster would be preferable to the truth. I unlocked the screen and the light stung my eyes. I opened the messaging app. The group chat titled "The Reynolds Empire" was active. It had been buzzing against my thigh for the last 20 minutes, vibrating like a nervous heartbeat. I scrolled up, my thumb trembling. They were not talking about the traffic. They were not talking about Dante. They were not asking if I was okay. Ebony had posted a photo. It was a close-up of a floral arrangement. White roses and gold ribbons. The caption read, "Mama, do you think these centerpieces are too tall? I don't want them blocking the camera angles for the toast." My mother had replied instantly, "Perfect, baby, just like a princess deserves." "The lighting at the Ritz is going to make your skin glow." My father had chimed in. "Preston just closed the deal on the venue upgrade. This is going to be the event of the season. Proud of you both." I read the messages again. The timestamps mocked me. While I was watching them lower my husband into the ground, my mother was critiquing rose stems. While the pastor was reading Psalm 23 about walking through the valley of the shadow of death, my sister was worrying about camera angles. They knew. I had sent the location. I had sent the time. I had sent 50 individual reminders. I had begged. 2 days ago I had called my mother sobbing, asking her to just be there. Just for an hour. She had sighed, that long, exasperated sigh she used when I was a child, and asked for help with my math homework. "Jasmine," she had said, "you know Ebony's engagement party has been on the calendar for months. Preston is inviting investors. It is a networking opportunity. We cannot be in two places at once. Besides Dante, well, it is not like he will know the difference, will he? He is gone. He is gone. The words replayed in my head as I looked at the group chat. They did not just ignore his funeral, they erased it. To them, Dante was just the mechanic, the man with grease under his fingernails, the mistake Jasmine made, the stain on their pristine reputation. They never knew him. They never tried to know him. They saw his old clothes and his calloused hands and decided he was beneath them. They did not know he was the smartest man I had ever met. They did not know how he held me when I cried after every family dinner where they made me feel small. Sudden vibration startled me. My phone lit up with a direct message. It was from Mom. My heart hammered against my ribs. A foolish, childish part of me thought maybe she is coming. Maybe she realized. Maybe she is at the gate. I opened the text. "Where are you?" The message read. I blinked, rain dripping from my eyelashes onto the screen, followed immediately by another bubble. "The insurance agent has been calling me all morning. He says he needs your signature to release the policy funds. We need that check to clear by tomorrow, Jasmine. Preston needs to make the final deposit for the catering, or they are going to cut the open bar. Get to the Ritz-Carlton, now. Do not make a scene and do not look depressing. This is your sister's big day." I stared at the words. The letters seemed to swim, rearranging themselves into a weapon. They did not care that I was a widow. They did not care that I was standing in mud watching the love of my life disappear under 6 feet of wet earth. They only cared about the insurance money. The policy my mother had taken out on Dante 10 years ago, back when we were first dating and living in his tiny apartment, claiming she just wanted to protect me. I had forgotten it even existed, but she hadn't. She had remembered the money the second his heart stopped beating. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap like a bone breaking. It was a quiet internal severing, like a heavy rope finally being cut. The sadness that had been drowning me for 3 days suddenly evaporated, boiled away by a heat so intense I felt dizzy. It was rage, pure, cold, clarifying rage. I looked up at the Reverend. "Go home, Reverend," I said. My voice was steady now. The tremble was gone. He looked concerned. "Mrs. Reynolds, are you sure? You shouldn't be alone right now." "I am not Mrs. Reynolds to them," I thought. "I am just the signature. I am just the bank account. I am just the obstacle between them and their open bar." "I am fine," I told him, and for the first time in days I meant it. I turned my back on the grave. I did not say goodbye to Dante. You do not say goodbye to someone who is a part of you. You take them with you. I walked away from the empty chairs. I walked past the weeping angels. I walked through the mud, my heels sinking with every step, but I did not care. I reached the service road where I had parked. There it sat. Dante's Ford F-150. It was a 1978 model painted a matte black that looked menacing in the rain. My family hated this truck. My sister called it a monstrosity. My mother called it a junk heap. They begged me not to park it in their driveway when I visited. But as I approached it now, I didn't see a junk heap. I saw steel. I saw American muscle. I saw the hours Dante had spent tuning the engine until it purred like a jungle cat. I ran my hand over the hood, the metal cold and solid under my palm. This truck was real. The mud on the tires was real. The man who loved it was real. The Ritz-Carlton was waiting. The white roses were waiting. My mother and her insurance papers were waiting. They wanted Jasmine the doormat. They wanted Jasmine the scapegoat. They wanted the quiet architect who designed gardens and kept her mouth shut. I climbed into the driver's seat. The smell of old leather and motor oil hit me, a scent that used to make me wrinkle my nose, but now smelled like courage. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a deep, guttural growl that shattered the cemetery's polite silence. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My mascara was running, my hair was plastered to my skull, and my eyes were red. I looked like a nightmare. "Good," I whispered. I threw the truck into gear. The tires spun in the gravel for a second, kicking up stones before gripping the road. I was not going home to cry. I was going to the Ritz-Carlton. I was going to give them exactly what they asked for. I was going to deliver the signature. But I was going to deliver a hell of a lot more than that. The funeral was over. The wake was about to begin. The valet at the Ritz-Carlton looked at Dante's truck like it was a contagious disease. He hesitated, his white-gloved hand hovering over the door handle, staring at the layers of red Georgia clay that caked the wheel wells. This was a vehicle meant for hauling lumber and towing broken-down cars, not for idling in the porte cochere of Atlanta's most expensive hotel. It sat there, a dark, rumbling beast, surrounded by sleek silver Bentleys and pearl-white Porsches. I did not wait for him to open the door. I shoved it open myself, the heavy metal groaning against the hinge. I stepped out and my boot landed in a puddle of pristine treated water that the hotel staff probably scrubbed with a toothbrush every morning. I tossed the keys to the valet. He caught them with the tips of his fingers, holding them away from his body, as if they were contaminated. "Keep it close," I said, my voice flat. "I will not be staying long." I walked toward the revolving glass doors. My reflection caught in the glass, and for a split second, I did not recognize the woman staring back. I was a specter. My black dress, usually modest and professional, was heavy with rain. It clung to my skin. The hem was stained with the mud from the graveside. My hair, which I had pinned up so carefully this morning, was coming undone, wet strands plastering against my neck. I looked like I had just crawled out of the earth myself. The lobby smelled of vanilla orchids and old money. It was a scent I had grown up with, a scent that used to mean safety, but now it just smelled like lies. As I crossed the marble floor, the rhythmic click of my heels was accompanied by the squelch of wet leather. People turned. Of course they turned. In a world of polished surfaces and polite smiles, grief is ugly. It is messy. I saw a woman in a Chanel suit whisper behind her hand to her husband. I saw a concierge reach for a phone, his eyes locked on the trail of muddy footprints I was leaving on their white marble. "Excuse me, miss." A security guard stepped into my path. He was tall, broad, wearing a uniform that fit him too well. He held up a hand, a polite but firm barrier. "Miss, I cannot let you inside looking like that," he said, his eyes scanning my muddy hem. "This is a private event space." I stopped. I looked up at him. I did not blink. Inside my chest, the fire that had started at the cemetery was burning hotter. It consumed the embarrassment I should have felt. It consumed the fear. "I am family," I said. "And if you touch me, I will scream so loud that every investor in that ballroom will think someone is being murdered in the lobby." "Do you want that on your shift?" He hesitated. He saw something in my eyes. It wasn't madness. It was the absolute absence of anything left to lose. He lowered his hand. He stepped aside. I pushed open the double doors to the grand ballroom. The sensory assault was immediate. The theme was white and gold. It was blinding. Thousands of white roses hung from the ceiling in cascading waterfalls. The tablecloths were white silk. The chairs were gold. The guests, over 200 of Atlanta's elite, were dressed in shades of cream, ivory, and champagne. It was a sea of brightness, a carefully curated heaven designed for Instagram. And then there was me, a jagged black scar standing in the entrance. The jazz band was playing a soft, upbeat tune, something about love and sunshine. The singer saw me first. Her voice faltered. Then the saxophonist stopped. One by one, the instruments died away until there was only the sound of a fork clinking against a glass, and then total silence. 200 heads turned. 400 eyes locked onto me. I stood there, dripping water onto the plush white carpet. I felt the weight of the room, the collective gasp, the judgment. They weren't looking at me with sympathy. They were looking at me with horror. I was a disruption. I was a stain. I was the ghost they had tried to exorcise by ignoring my texts. "Jasmine," The voice was shrill, cutting through the silence like breaking glass. It was Ebony. My sister came marching across the dance floor. She looked like a tiered wedding cake in her engagement dress, a massive structural thing made of white organza. Her hair was pulled back in a severe perfect bun, highlighting the diamond earrings that probably cost more than Dante's entire garage. She did not run to me with open arms. She did not look at my red eyes. She looked at my shoes. She stopped 3 feet away from me, afraid to get her dress dirty. "Are you insane?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous, though in the silent room it carried to the back tables. "Look at you. You are dripping on the carpet. You look like a drowned rat." "Hello, Ebony," I said. "Why are you here?" She waved her hand frantically as if she could wave me out of existence. "I told Mom to handle you. Today is the most important day of my life. Preston has venture capitalists here. We have photographers from Southern living here. And you show up looking like the Grim Reaper." I looked at her. I looked at the sister I had tutored in math, the sister I had covered for when she snuck out in high school, the sister whose college tuition I had helped pay for when our parents had a liquidity crisis 5 years ago. I realized I didn't know her. I had never known her. I had only known the version of her I wanted to believe in. "I am not the Grim Reaper, Ebony," I said, my voice calm, contrasting sharply with her hysteria. "I am just the widow." "Widow." She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, stop being so dramatic. You are ruining the vibe. Go change. Or better yet, go home. We can talk about your little tragedy later when you are presentable." My little tragedy. I took a step forward. Ebony flinched, stepping back to protect her dress. "I buried him today, Ebony," I said. The words came out cold hard like stones. "While you were getting your makeup done, I was watching them shovel dirt onto Dante's face. While you were posing for photos, I was standing alone in the rain. Today was the funeral. You know that. I sent you the time. I sent you the location." A murmur went through the crowd. Someone gasped. Ebony's face flushed pink, not with shame, but with anger at being called out. "Lower your voice," she snapped. "You are embarrassing me. Nobody wants to hear about death at an engagement party. It is selfish, Jasmine. Incredibly selfish." Before I could respond, a hand clamped onto my arm. It was a grip I knew, sharp nails digging into the soft flesh of my bicep. I turned to see my mother, Patricia. She was wearing a gold sequined gown that was far too young for her, her face plastered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She didn't look at my face. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask if I was okay. Her eyes went instantly to the clutch bag I was holding in my left hand. "Jasmine," she said through gritted teeth, maintaining that fake smile for the audience watching us. "Thank goodness you are here." We were getting worried. "Worried?" I asked. "Worried about me. Worried about the time," she hissed. "The bank closes at 4. We need to mobile deposit that check today if we want it to clear for the vendors tomorrow." She released my arm and immediately reached for my bag. It was a violation so casual, so expected, that it took my breath away. She didn't see a daughter standing in front of her. She saw a walking ATM. She saw a signature. "Give it to me," she demanded, her fingers clawing at the clasp of my purse. "Tell me you brought the papers. Tell me you didn't leave them at that house." I pulled the bag away, holding it against my chest. The movement made water from my sleeve splash onto her gold sequins. She recoiled as if I had thrown acid on her. "You are wet!" she shrieked, brushing frantically at her dress. "Ugh, Jasmine. Have some respect. This is vintage respect," I repeated. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. "You want respect, Mom?" I looked around the room. I saw my father standing near the bar, swirling his scotch, pretending he didn't see the commotion. I saw Preston, my future brother-in-law, laughing with a group of men, glancing over at us with a look of amusement. "Yes, respect," Patricia snapped, lunging for the bag again. "Now give me the damn insurance papers. Preston is waiting. He needs to show proof of funds to the caterer before they cut off the champagne." "Do not be difficult, Jasmine. Not today. You owe your sister this. I owe her, I asked. Yes, you owe her. You married that mechanic and embarrassed us for years. The least you can do is sign over that policy so Ebony can have the start in life she deserves. Dante is dead. He doesn't need the money. We do. She managed to snag the strap of my purse. We stood there, mother and daughter, engaged in a tug-of-war in the middle of the most expensive ballroom in Atlanta. The absurdity of it washed over me. My husband was cold in the ground, my dress was soaked with grave mud, and my mother was fighting me for money to pay for champagne. Let go, I said. Not until you give me the papers, she hissed. I looked at her. I looked deep into the eyes of the woman who had given birth to me, and I finally accepted the truth I had been running from my entire life. She did not love me. She loved what I could provide. She loved the image of a perfect family as long as I stayed in the corner and paid the bills. Okay, I said softly. I let go of the bag. Patricia stumbled back, surprised by the sudden release. She clutched the bag to her chest like a prize fighter holding a belt. She let out a breath of relief, her composure returning instantly. Good girl, she said, patting her hair. I knew you would be reasonable. Go wait in the lobby. I will bring the papers out for you to sign once I find a pen. You really aren't dressed for the party, sweetie. She turned her back on me. She turned back to the crowd, flashing a winning smile, waving the bag slightly, as if to signal that the crisis was averted. Ebony smoothed her dress, rolling her eyes at me one last time before turning to follow Mom. I stood there empty-handed. But I wasn't empty. I felt lighter. I felt a strange cold power rising up my spine. They thought they had won. They thought they had the papers. They thought they had the money. They had no idea what was actually in that bag, and they had no idea that by taking it, they had just sealed their own fate. The Jasmine who sought their approval had died in the rain this morning. The woman standing in the ballroom was someone else entirely, and she was just getting started. The heavy oak door of the VIP lounge clicked shut, sealing us off from the music and the murmur of the guests. The silence in the room was sudden and suffocating. My mother released my arm with a shove, as if touching me for too long would stain her skin. She smoothed the front of her gold-sequined gown, taking a deep breath to compose herself, before turning to unleash the storm she had been holding back in the ballroom. You have absolutely no shame, do you? Patricia hissed, her voice low and trembling with rage. She walked over to a side table and poured herself a glass of water from a crystal pitcher, her hands shaking slightly. You walk into the most important social event of the year looking like a beggar. Do you know who is out there? The vice president of the Chamber of Commerce. 2 partners from Goldman Sachs. And you drag your mud and your misery right through the center of it all. I stood by the door, feeling the air conditioning chill my damp skin. I did not sit down. I did not want to ruin the velvet upholstery of the chaise lounge, and frankly, I did not think I had the strength to stand back up if I sat. I buried my husband today, Mom, I said quietly. It was the only defense I had, though I knew it was useless. Patricia slammed the glass down. Water sloshed onto the polished wood. Stop saying that. She spun around, her eyes blazing. Stop acting like you are the only person who has ever lost someone. People die, Jasmine. It happens. But smart people handle it with dignity. They do not use it as an excuse to sabotage their family. She took a step closer, her perfume a heavy floral scent that I had always associated with judgment filling my nose. This is what happens when you make poor choices, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. I told you 10 years ago. I begged you. Dr. Harrison was ready to propose. He was a neurosurgeon, Jasmine. He came from a good family. He had a future. But no, you had to follow your heart. You had to run off with the mechanic. The man who came home with dirt under his fingernails every day. Dante was a good man, I said, my voice hardening. He worked harder than anyone I know. He was a nobody, Patricia shouted, finally losing her composure. And look where it got him. Dead at 35 because he probably didn't have the sense to go to a doctor when he felt sick. Or maybe he was just too cheap to pay for a checkup. The cruelty of her words took the air out of my lungs. Dante had died of a sudden aneurysm. It was a genetic time bomb. No amount of money or status could have stopped it. But she didn't care about the truth. She only cared about the narrative. To her, Dante's death was just the final proof that he was a failure. And now he leaves you with nothing. She continued pacing the small room. No savings, no assets, just debt and that ugly truck outside. You are going to come crawling back to us, aren't you? Asking for money. Asking for a place to stay. I started to shake my head to tell her that I would never ask her for a dime, but she cut me off. Well, luckily for you, I am a planner. I protect this family even when you try to destroy it. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded document. It was old. The edges were soft and worn. I took out a life insurance policy on Dante when you two first moved in together, she said, smoothing the paper on the table. Back when he was renting that basement apartment and couldn't even afford a proper engagement ring. I paid the premiums for 10 years, Jasmine. Me. Not you, not him. So don't you dare look at me like I am the villain. She tapped a manicured fingernail on the bottom of the page. The beneficiary is me, she said coldly. It is $500,000, and I need you to sign this waiver confirming that you will not contest the payout. The insurance company is being difficult because you are the spouse. They need your signature to release the funds to me immediately. I stared at the paper. She had bet against my marriage. She had bet on his death. And now she was here to collect her winnings before his body was even cold. You want me to sign away his death benefit? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. While I am still wearing the clothes I buried him in, Patricia's eyes narrowed. Do not play the victim. You do not deserve that money. You didn't pay for it. I did. And frankly, we need it. This wedding is costing a fortune and Preston's business is expanding. We need liquidity. Just sign the paper, Jasmine, and you can go back to your little pity party. Before I could answer, the door swung open. Preston walked in. He looked every inch the tech entrepreneur my mother adored. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, his hair styled, a glass of scotch in his hand. He brought a different kind of energy into the room, arrogant, dismissive, and sickeningly casual. Ladies, he said, flashing a bright white smile that didn't reach his eyes. I can hear the love all the way out in the hallway. Let's keep the volume down, shall we? We don't want the investors to think there is trouble in paradise. He walked over to Patricia and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. She instantly relaxed, leaning into his touch like he was the son she actually wanted. She is being difficult, Preston, Patricia complained, gesturing at me. She won't sign the waiver. Preston turned his gaze to me. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on the mud on my hem with a look of mild disgust. He took a sip of his scotch, swirling the amber liquid in the glass. Jazz, look, I get it, he said, his tone condescendingly gentle, like he was explaining simple math to a toddler. You are emotional, you are grieving. We all respect that. But we have to be practical. He set his drink down and leaned against the table, crossing his arms. I did some digging, Jazz. I know Dante didn't leave you in a great spot. The guy ran a garage. It is a cash business, low margins, unstable. I am guessing the debts are piling up already. The funeral costs alone must be stressing you out. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He clicked a gold pen and started writing. Here is what I am going to do, he said, not even looking at me as he wrote. I am going to help you out. Family helps family, right? He tore the check out and slid it across the table toward me. $5,000, he said, tapping the check. That should cover a decent service. Nothing fancy but respectable. You can pay off the undertaker and maybe have a little left over for groceries. I looked at the check. $5,000. He thought he could buy my dignity for the price of a used car. What do you want, Preston? I asked. You do not give money away for free. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Sharp girl, I like that. Okay, here is the deal. I need that property Dante was operating out of. That old warehouse district is being rezoned. I have some clients, high net worth individuals who need secure climate controlled storage for their luxury vehicles. Ferraris, Lamborghinis. They don't want to park them on the street. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. Dante's garage is a dump, Jazz. Let's be honest, it is a pile of bricks and grease, but the location is decent. If you sign the deed over to me, I will take the headache off your hands. I will pay for the demolition. I will handle the environmental cleanup from all that oil he spilled everywhere. You get 5,000 cash today to bury your husband, and you get rid of a worthless liability. He smiled, waiting for me to thank him. It was a perfect storm of ignorance. My mother wanted the insurance money because she thought Dante was a broke failure. Preston wanted the garage because he thought it was a shack he could steal for pennies. They thought Dante was a nobody. They thought he was just a mechanic who fixed Toyotas and changed oil. They had never asked him about his work. They had never visited his office. They had never looked beyond his work boots. They didn't know that the garage was a 20,000 square foot facility equipped with state-of-the-art robotics. They didn't know that Dante wasn't fixing Corollas. He was designing custom intake manifolds for Formula One racing teams. They didn't know that the dump Preston wanted to bulldoze sat on land that Dante owned outright, land that had tripled in value in the last 5 years. And they certainly didn't know about the patent. I looked from my mother's greedy, desperate eyes to Preston's smug, predatory grin. They weren't grieving. They were vultures. They saw a carcass and they wanted to pick the bones clean before the sun went down. A cold calm settled over me. It was the calm of a sniper waiting for the wind to die down. If I screamed at them now, if I told them the truth, they wouldn't believe me. Or worse, they would try to take it all. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be like Dante. I needed to let them underestimate me until it was too late for them to run. You really think his garage is worthless? I asked softly, my eyes wide and feigning innocence. Preston laughed. Jazz, it is a teardown. I am doing you a favor. The taxes alone will bankrupt you in 6 months. And the insurance. I turned to my mother. You really need it that bad? It is rightfully mine, she sniffed. And yes, weddings are expensive. I looked at the waiver. I looked at the check for $5,000. Okay, I said. Preston's eyebrows shot up. Smart choice. I picked up the pen. My hand did not shake. I signed the waiver for the insurance. I pushed it toward my mother. She snatched it up instantly, checking the signature like a hawk. And the garage? Preston asked, uncapping his pen again, ready to draft a quick agreement on a napkin if he had to. I can't sign the deed over today, I lied smoothly. The papers are with the lawyer. But I can bring you the transfer documents, when Preston demanded. Monday, I said. There is a reading of the will on Monday morning. Bring your checkbook, Preston. If you want the garage, we can settle it then. Monday works, Preston said, looking at his watch. I will have my legal team draft the transfer. Just bring the keys and the deed. I turned to the door. I didn't take the $5,000 check. I left it sitting on the table. Where are you going? Mom asked, already tucking the insurance waiver into her purse. You can't go back out there. You are a mess. I am leaving, I said. I have a funeral to pay for. I walked out of the VIP room. I didn't look back. I didn't see the smirk on Preston's face or the relief on my mother's. I walked through the lobby past the security guard, who watched me with suspicion, and out into the cool night air. The rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet pavement and ozone. I climbed into Dante's truck and sat there for a moment in the dark. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They wanted the money. They wanted the building. They wanted to erase Dante and pave over his life with a parking lot for rich people's toys. I started the engine. The rumble of the V8 was a comfort, a deep, angry growl that matched the feeling in my chest. They invited themselves to the reading of the will. They invited themselves to their own execution. And I was going to enjoy every single second of it. The tip of the ballpoint pen hovered over the signature line. The paper was cheap copy paper, stark white against the dark mahogany of the table. My hand was trembling, but not from the fear my mother assumed was gripping me. It was trembling from the sheer effort it took not to rip the document into 1,000 pieces and throw it in her face. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to fight, to flip the table, to scream the truth about Dante's millions and watch their smug expressions shatter like glass. But then a voice echoed in the back of my mind. It was Dante. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second and I was back on our front porch 3 months ago. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. Dante was wiping grease from his hands with a rag, looking at me with those intense, knowing eyes. He had been talking about his estate planning, a conversation I had tried to shut down because I did not want to imagine a world without him. He had held my face in his hands and said, "Jasmine, listen to me. If something happens, they are going to come for you. They are going to come with their hands out and their teeth bared. Do not fight them immediately. Let them think they have won. Let them show you exactly who they are when they think nobody is watching. Let them expose their own greed. That is the only way you will be free of them forever. Let them show their teeth." I opened my eyes. I looked at my mother, who was tapping her foot impatiently. I looked at Preston, who was already mentally spending the money from the garage sale. I looked at Ebony, who was checking her reflection in her phone screen, bored by my hesitation. They had shown their teeth. They had bitten me while I was down, and now I had to let them think they had swallowed me whole. I remembered the phone call with Mr. Sterling early that morning. The lawyer had been adamant. Let them sign the waivers, Jasmine. Let them commit to their narrative. The more they deny Dante's worth, the harder they will fall when the truth comes out. It is a legal trap, and they are walking right into it. I took a deep, shaky breath. I let my shoulders slump forward. I allowed my face to crumble, letting the exhaustion and the grief take over my features. I made myself small. I made myself look exactly like the defeated, penniless widow they wanted to see. I looked up at my mother, making sure my eyes were wet with tears. "Mom," I whispered, my voice cracking. "You are right. I cannot do this alone." Patricia stopped tapping her foot. Her eyes lit up. She leaned in, smelling victory. I continued, letting a sob escape. "I do not have any money, Mom. Dante left me with nothing. The funeral cost the debts, the house upkeep. I do not know how I am going to survive the next month." I paused, looking between her and Preston. "If I sign this, if I give you the insurance money, can you help me? Just a little. Could you loan me a few $1,000s from the payout, just so I can buy groceries? Just until I find a cheaper place to live." The room went silent. I held my breath. This was the test. This was the moment that would seal their fate in my heart forever. Even a stranger would have said yes. Even a monster might have thrown a crumb to a starving dog. Patricia and Ebony exchanged a look. And then slowly a smile spread across my mother's face. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who realizes the prey has a broken leg. She laughed. A short, sharp sound. "Oh, Jasmine," she said, shaking her head. "You always were a beggar at heart." She reached out and patted my cheek. Her hand was cold. "We will see," she said. "But I am not going to promise anything. You need to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. Maybe this is a good lesson for you. If you had married Dr. Harrison, you would not be begging your mother for grocery money at 32 years old." Ebony chimed in, not looking up from her phone. "Yeah, it really depends on your attitude, Jasmine. If you ruin my party today, do not expect a dime. But if you disappear and let us enjoy the night, maybe Mom will cut you a check for a few $100. Maybe." Preston chuckled, shaking his head as he poured himself another drink. "Unbelievable. The entitlement. Just sign the paper, Jazz. Do not push your luck." There it was. The absolute bottom. They would take $500,000 of my husband's money and refuse to buy me a loaf of bread. I looked down at the paper. The last thread of guilt I felt about what was going to happen on Monday snapped. I was not destroying my family. There was no family to destroy. "Okay," I said softly. I understand. I pressed the pen to the paper. The ink flowed smoothly. I signed my name, Jasmine Reynolds. I dated it. I pushed the document across the table to my mother. She snatched it up so fast she almost knocked over her water glass. She blew on the ink to dry at her eyes, scanning the signature to make sure it was legitimate. Finally, she breathed, folding the paper and shoving it deep into her clutch. That wasn't so hard, was it? She stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. She had what she came for. I was no longer useful. Now fix your face before you leave, she said, adjusting her dress. And use the back exit. We do not want the guests seeing you leave looking like a swamp creature. I stood up. My legs felt strong. The trembling had stopped. I will see myself out, I said. I turned to Preston. He was blocking the path to the door, looking pleased with himself. He thought he had just acquired a prime piece of real estate for the price of a funeral. I reached into the pocket of my sodden dress. My fingers brushed against the heavy black cardstock of the business card Mr. Sterling had given me. It was embossed with gold lettering, thick and expensive. I stopped in front of Preston. I looked up at him. I needed him to be close. I will bring the deed on Monday. Preston, I said, making my voice sound hollow. Good, he said, looking over my head. 9 a.m. Don't be late. I have a tea time at noon. I reached out as if to steady myself on his arm. He flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. With a quick sleight of hand movement that Dante had taught me, a trick he used when he was surprising me with jewelry, I slipped the black card into the breast pocket of Preston's tuxedo jacket. It slid in behind his silk pocket square, invisible to him but right against his heart. Thank you for the offer, I said. It means a lot. I walked past him. I walked past Ebony, who didn't even wave. I walked past my mother, who was already texting the insurance agent. I opened the heavy oak door and stepped out into the hallway. The music from the ballroom hit me again, a cheerful, upbeat jazz number that felt miles away from where I was mentally. I walked down the corridor, but I didn't head for the back exit. I walked straight through the main lobby. I held my head high. I did not care about the mud anymore. I did not care about the stairs. I was walking out of a prison I hadn't realized I was in for 30 years. Back inside the VIP room, the air was thick with self-congratulation. Preston laughed, adjusting his jacket. God, she is pathetic. Did you see her shaking? Patricia was beaming. She is desperate. That is good for us. It means she won't fight us on the house or the car. We can strip that mechanic's estate clean by the end of the month. Ebony giggled. I can't believe she actually asked for a loan. The nerve. Preston reached into his pocket to check for his cigar cutter. His fingers brushed against something sharp and stiff. He frowned. He pulled out the black card. What is this? He muttered. He held it up to the light. The gold embossing caught the glare of the chandelier. Sterling, Vance and Partners, he read aloud. Attorneys at law. He flipped the card over. There was a handwritten note on the back in elegant cursive script. Formal notice of testamentary reading. The last will and testament of Dante Reynolds. Monday, 9:00 a.m. Attendance is mandatory for all named parties. Preston stared at the card. A confused frown creased his forehead. Sterling, he whispered. That is the most expensive firm in the city. They represent the Hawks. They represent the Coca-Cola executives. He looked up at Patricia, his face twisting into a sneer of disbelief. Why would a grease monkey have a will with Sterling and Partners? Patricia waved her hand dismissively. Probably a mistake. Or maybe he fixed the lawyer's car and got a discount. Do not overthink it, Preston. It is just a formality. A broke man's will is just a list of debts. Preston looked at the card again. He ran his thumb over the raised lettering. A cold seed of doubt planted itself in his gut, but he crushed it down with his ego. Yeah, he said, tossing the card onto the table next to the untouched check he had written for me. Probably just wants to leave his wrench collection to a cousin. Thinks he is important. He laughed again, but the sound was thinner this time. Come on, Patricia said, linking her arm through his. Let's go toast to the engagement and to the insurance money. Drinks are on me. They walked out of the room, leaving the black card sitting on the polished mahogany table, glowing ominously under the lights. They went back to their party. They went back to their champagne. They had no idea that the timer had just started ticking down on their entire world. For the next 3 days, I ceased to exist. I did not leave the small wooden bungalow that Dante and I had called home for 5 years. To the outside world, specifically to my family, this house was an eyesore. It was a single-story structure with peeling gray paint and a porch that sagged slightly on the left side. My mother refused to step foot inside, claiming it smelled of motor oil and poverty. My sister called it the shack. They saw the exterior and judged the book by its cover, just as they had judged Dante. Inside, however, it was a sanctuary. Dante had renovated every square inch with his own hands. The floors were reclaimed heart pine, warm and smooth under bare feet. The kitchen was a chef's dream with custom cabinets he had built to match my height perfectly. It was not a shack. It was a fortress built of love, and for 72 hours I pulled up the drawbridge. I turned off my phone. I unplugged the landline. I let the battery on my laptop die. I sat in his favorite leather armchair wrapped in his flannel shirts, and I allowed myself to feel the silence. I needed to remember him before the noise of the legal battle began. I needed to fortify my soul. While I sat in the quiet dark miles away in the manicured suburbs of Buckhead, my family was loud. They were vibrant. They were celebrating their perceived victory. I know this because the internet never forgets, and Ebony lived her entire life for an audience. On Saturday afternoon, she went live on Instagram. I watched the saved video later with a cold detachment. The camera was set up in my parents' living room, framed perfectly to show off the crystal chandelier and the white grand piano that nobody knew how to play. Ebony sat in the center of the frame, wearing a white silk robe with bride embroidered on the back in gold thread. My mother sat next to her, beaming like she had just won the lottery. "Hey guys," Ebony chirped, waving at the screen with her manicured hand. "We are doing a huge unboxing today. The engagement gifts have been pouring in, and we are just so blessed." She held up a box from Tiffany & Co. "Preston's business partners sent this. Look at these champagne flutes. They are exquisite." My mother leaned in, her face heavily made up. "Only the best for my baby. We are going to need these for the after party. By the way, everyone keeps asking about the venue expansion." Ebony laughed, a tinkling, practiced sound. "Oh yes, big news. You guys know that ugly lot next to Mom and Dad's estate? The one with the creepy old house? Well, we are finally acquiring it. We are going to bulldoze it next month to put in an infinity pool and a guest house for Preston and me." My mother nodded vigorously. "It has been a long time coming. We finally cleared the legal hurdles. It is going to be stunning. No more eyesores bringing down our property value." They were talking about my home. They were talking about the house where I had nursed Dante through the flu. The house where we had danced in the kitchen at 2 in the morning. They spoke of destroying it with the same casual tone one uses when discussing pulling weeds. They did not mention my name. They did not mention that the legal hurdle was a grieving widow. They just saw land. They just saw a swimming pool. But the camera only shows what the user wants you to see. It did not show what was happening in the hallway just outside the frame. It did not show Preston pacing back and forth on the expensive Persian rug, sweating through his polo shirt. Preston was not celebrating. He was suffocating. While Ebony was showing off crystal glasses, Preston was staring at his phone screen, watching red numbers bleed across his portfolio app. The tech genius facade was crumbling. He had leveraged his company's assets to cover a massive gambling debt in Las Vegas 6 months ago, convinced he could earn it back on a risky cryptocurrency bet. He was wrong. The market had crashed 48 hours ago. He was currently down $2 million. His creditors were not the kind of men who sent polite letters. They were men who made phone calls at midnight. He had missed 3 payments. He needed cash. He needed it fast. He needed liquid assets he could flip. He looked at the closed door of the living room, listening to Ebony giggle about her wedding registry. He felt a surge of resentment. He needed that insurance money. But more importantly, he needed the deed to Dante's garage. He had lied to Jasmine about wanting it for parking. He already had a buyer lined up, a developer who wanted the land for a high-rise condo project. The offer was $1.5 million for the land alone. That money would save his life. It would plug the hole in his company's accounts before the auditors arrived next month. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. He had to get that deed on Monday. Jasmine was weak. She was stupid. She would sign. She had to sign. Sunday night arrived, the eve of the confrontation. My family gathered for their traditional Sunday dinner. The dining table was set with fine china, roast beef, glazed carrots, expensive red wine breathing in a decanter. There were 4 places set. My seat was conspicuously absent. My father Robert was a quiet man. He had spent 30 years letting my mother steer the ship, nodding along to avoid conflict. He cut his meat slowly, the silence at the table heavy despite the clinking of silverware. He looked at the empty space where I used to sit. "Patricia," he said, his voice hesitant. "Have you heard from Jasmine?" I tried calling her cell, but it went straight to voicemail. My mother didn't look up from her plate. "She is fine, Robert. She is sulking. You know how she gets. She wants us to chase her. She wants to be the center of attention because she is jealous of Ebony." Robert frowned. "She just lost her husband, Pat. Maybe we should go over there. Check on her." "Absolutely not," my mother snapped, slicing a carrot with unnecessary force. "We are not going to that disgusting shack. Besides, she needs to learn a lesson. She disrespected us at the party. She made a scene. If she wants to be part of this family, she needs to come to us with an apology." Ebony took a sip of wine. "She will be there tomorrow morning, Dad. She promised Preston she would bring the papers. She needs the money we offered her. She is broke. She has no choice." Preston nodded, though his hand shook slightly as he lifted his glass. "Yeah, Robert. Do not worry. We are handling it. We are actually doing her a favor. We are taking liabilities off her hands. We are being generous." My father sighed and went back to his meal. He was a weak man. He loved his comfort more than he loved justice. He swallowed his concern along with his roast beef, choosing the path of least resistance. He convinced himself that his wife and daughter knew best. He told himself that stripping me of my home was a form of tough love. Monday morning broke with a sky so blue it looked painted. The sun was shining on Atlanta, oblivious to the storm that was brewing in a high-rise downtown. I woke up early. I showered and washed the grief from my hair. I put on a navy blue suit that Dante had bought me for my job interviews years ago. It was tailored, sharp, and professional. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I put on my glasses. I looked in the mirror. I did not see a widow. I saw an architect. I saw a woman who knew how to build structures that could withstand hurricanes. Across town, the Reynolds family was also preparing. They treated the morning like a runway show. Ebony wore a white dress, continuing her bridal theme. My mother wore a crimson power suit intended to intimidate. Preston wore his best Italian suit, trying to project the image of a successful CEO. They piled into Preston's leased Mercedes. The mood was high. They were confident. "Can you believe the address on the card?" Ebony laughed from the back seat. "It is probably a shared workspace. Or maybe a closet inside a strip mall." My mother checked her lipstick in the visor mirror. "Just remember the plan. We get the signature for the garage transfer first. Then we give her the check for $5,000. If she cries, ignore her. We have a lunch reservation at Le Bilboquet at noon. We need to be out of there by 11. Preston gripped the steering wheel. He drove fast. He was eager to get the paper that would save his skin. He imagined the meeting. A dusty office, a tired, cheap lawyer in a wrinkled suit, Jasmine crying in the corner. He would dazzle them with legal jargon, throw some cash on the table, and walk out a winner. They pulled up to the curb at the address I had given them. The laughter in the car died instantly. They were not at a strip mall. They were not at a shared workspace. They were parked in front of the Sovereign Building, the towering glass spire that defined the Buckhead skyline. It was the most exclusive, expensive commercial real estate in the city. Ebony rolled down the window, craning her neck to look up at the 50 stories of shimmering glass. "Are we at the right place?" she asked, her voice small. Preston checked the card again. 3344 Peachtree Road, Suite 5000. "This is it," he said, his voice tight. My mother scoffed, recovering her composure quickly. "Well, maybe the lawyer rents a small interior office. Or maybe Dante was being sued by someone powerful, and that is why we are here. Do not be intimidated. It changes nothing. Jasmine is still broke. Dante was still a nobody." They got out of the car. They walked into the lobby with their heads held high, the click of their expensive shoes echoing on the marble. They smiled at the receptionist. They pressed the button for the penthouse floor. They thought they were walking into a negotiation they had already won. They had no idea they were stepping onto a trapdoor that I had spent the last 3 days unlocking. The elevator doors closed, sealing them in. Going up. The elevator ride was a silent ascent into the stratosphere. The digital display above the brushed steel doors counted the floors upward in rapid succession. 10, 20, 30. My ears popped as we passed the 40th floor. The Reynolds family stood around me in the confined space, but the air between us was thin and cold. My mother Patricia kept adjusting her crimson jacket, her eyes darting to the floor numbers with a mixture of confusion and annoyance. She had expected a basement office. She had expected a strip mall next to a laundromat. She had not expected the private express elevator of the Sovereign Building, the tallest and most exclusive address in Atlanta. Ebony was the first to break the silence. She looked at her reflection in the mirrored wall of the elevator, smoothing her white dress. "Why are we going so high?" she asked, her voice tinged with a nervous tremor she tried to hide. "I thought broke people lawyers worked on the ground floor so they could run away from creditors faster." Preston chuckled, though the sound was tight. "Maybe he is jumping out the window," he joked. My mother let out a sharp, derisive laugh. "Don't be silly. This is obviously a debt collection firm. Dante probably owed money to every shark in the city. They probably dragged his estate up here to squeeze blood from a stone. That is why we are here. To tell them there is no money and to walk away." The elevator chimed softly. The doors slid open. We were not greeted by a debt collector. We were not greeted by a chaotic office filled with ringing phones and piles of paper. We stepped out into a lobby that was quieter than a cathedral and twice as expensive. The floors were Italian marble white, with veins of gold that matched the morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was breathtaking. All of Atlanta lay spread out beneath us like a toy village. The cars on the highway were specks of dust. The people were invisible. A receptionist sat behind a desk that looked like a piece of modern art carved from a single block of obsidian. She was an elegant woman with silver hair pulled back in a chignon. She did not look up with annoyance. She looked up with recognition. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said, her voice smooth and professional. "Mr. Sterling is expecting you in the boardroom." My mother blinked. She opened her mouth to speak, to demand an explanation, to ask why a mechanic had a meeting in the penthouse, but the receptionist had already gestured toward a set of massive double doors made of frosted glass. I walked forward. I did not wait for them. I knew the way. I had been here yesterday on Sunday while they were unboxing champagne flutes. I pushed open the glass doors and stepped into the inner sanctum. The boardroom was vast. One wall was entirely glass, framing the skyline. In the center of the room sat a long table made of dark polished mahogany that gleamed under the recessed lighting. At the head of the table sat Mr. Sterling. He was a man who commanded respect without saying a word. In his late 60s, he was a pillar of the African-American legal community in Georgia. He wore a charcoal gray three-piece suit that cost more than Preston's car. His hair was cut close gray and distinguished. He sat with his hands folded on the table, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable behind gold-rimmed spectacles. And next to him, to his right, sat me. I took my seat. I placed my hands on the table. I did not look at my feet. I did not hunch my shoulders. I looked straight ahead at the 4 empty leather chairs waiting for my family. They shuffled in. The confidence that had carried them out of the car was starting to crack. They looked around the room, taking in the expensive art on the walls, the view, the sheer power that radiated from the space. It didn't fit their narrative. It didn't fit the story of the poor, stupid Dante. My mother recovered first. Denial is a powerful drug, and she had been overdosing on it for years. She marched to the chair opposite Mr. Sterling and threw her purse onto the table. "All right," she said, her voice loud in the quiet room. "Let's get this over with. I assume you are the one handling the bankruptcy? Or is it a lawsuit? Who is suing him?" Mr. Sterling did not flinch. He did not blink. He simply watched her with a calm, detached curiosity, like a scientist observing a particularly noisy insect. "Good morning, Mrs. Reynolds," he said. His voice was deep, a baritone that vibrated in the chest. "Please take a seat." Preston pulled out a chair and flopped into it. He was trying to regain control of the situation by being disrespectful. He stretched his legs out and with a deliberate motion placed his feet clad in Italian loafers right onto the edge of the polished mahogany table. He crossed his ankles. He leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. "Look, buddy," Preston said, grinning at Mr. Sterling. "We are busy people. We have a lunch reservation at Le Bilboquet in an hour, and my fiancé here needs to go for a dress fitting. So let's skip the legal mumbo-jumbo." He gestured vaguely at me with his chin. "Jasmine said she brought the transfer deed for the garage, and I assume you have the paperwork for whatever debts Dante left behind. Just give us the bottom line so we can sign the waivers and get out of here." Ebony sat down next to him, looking bored. "Yeah, seriously. This room is depressing. Can we just get the check? Mom said there is an insurance payout waiting." Mr. Sterling looked at Preston's shoes on his table. He looked at them for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he looked up at Preston. "Mr. Vance," he said softly, "I would suggest you remove your feet from my table. This wood is 300 years old. It is worth more than your company's current valuation." Preston froze. The smile faltered. He slowly lowered his feet to the floor, his face flushing a dull red. Mr. Sterling opened a leather-bound folder in front of him. He smoothed the paper inside. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," he said. "You are under the impression that you are here to settle debts. You believe you are here to collect a modest insurance payout of $500,000. My mother leaned forward, her eyes greedy. "Yes, that is exactly why we are here. The policy is in my name." Mr. Sterling took off his glasses. He began to polish them with a silk handkerchief. He looked tired of them already. "We are not here to discuss $500,000, Mrs. Reynolds," he said. "That policy was a relic. It is insignificant." He put his glasses back on. He looked at each of them in turn. "My mother, my father, Ebony, Preston. We are here to discuss the estate of Dante Reynolds," he continued. "We are here to discuss a portfolio of assets, intellectual property rights, and venture capital investments." He paused for effect. The silence in the room was absolute. "We are here to discuss $45 million. The number hung in the air. It was too big for them to comprehend. My mother blinked rapidly. Ebony's mouth fell open. Preston went still as a statue. 45? What my mother whispered. "Million," Mr. Sterling repeated. $45 million. And that is a conservative estimate." Preston let out a short, nervous laugh. "You are joking! This is a prank, right, Dante?" "The mechanic. The guy who drove a truck from the 70s. Mr. Sterling did not smile. He reached into the folder and pulled out a stack of documents. He slid them across the table. They were glossy brochures, patent filings, and bank statements. Dante Reynolds was not just a mechanic, Mr. Vance. He was the founder of DR Logistics and Engineering. He held 12 patents for high-performance engine cooling systems used by NASCAR and Formula One. He was also the majority shareholder in several tech startups. Mr. Sterling leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Preston's, including a 51% stake in a company called TechStart. "Does that name sound familiar to you?" Mr. Vance? Preston's face drained of color. He looked like he was going to be sick. TechStart was his company. Or at least he thought it was. My mother was shaking her head. No. No, this is impossible. Jasmine put you up to this. She forged these papers. Dante didn't have money. We paid for his dinner when he came over. We let him fix our cars for free. She turned to me, her eyes wide and manic. Tell them, Jasmine. Tell them. This is a lie. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had called my husband a loser for 10 years. It is not a lie, Mom, I said. My voice was steady. Dante didn't care about flashy cars or expensive suits. He cared about building things. He cared about substance. Unlike you. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. The estate is vast, he said, and the distribution of these assets is governed by a very specific, very ironclad will that Mr. Reynolds drafted 6 months ago. He tapped the document in front of him. However, before we proceed to the distribution, there is a clause we must address. A clause regarding the family of his wife. He looked at my family with a gaze that was almost pitying. It is called the Respect Clause, and I am afraid none of you have met the criteria to satisfy it. My mother looked from the lawyer to me, and for the first time I saw true fear in her eyes. She wasn't looking at a daughter anymore. She was looking at a judge. And she knew deep down in her hollow heart that the verdict was going to destroy her. The silence that followed the lawyer's declaration was heavy enough to crush bones. $45 million. The number seemed to bounce off the glass walls of the penthouse, echoing in the vast emptiness of the room. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. It was as if the oxygen had been sucked out of the air conditioning vents. I watched my family. I watched the blood drain from their faces, leaving them pale and waxy under the expensive boardroom lights. They looked like statues of their own greed frozen in a moment of absolute comprehension failure. Then the spell broke. My mother Patricia let out a laugh. It was a sharp, jagged sound, loud and bordering on hysterical. She slapped her hand on the mahogany table, shaking her head as if she had just heard a ridiculous joke. "Oh, please," she scoffed, leaning back in her chair and crossing her arms. "You almost had me there for a second, Mr. Sterling. You really are a dramatic old man. $45 million. In what currency? Zimbabwean dollars? Monopoly money?" She looked around at Preston and Ebony, seeking their validation, trying to rally her troops against this absurdity. "This is Dante we are talking about," she continued, her voice dripping with venom. The man wore overalls to Thanksgiving dinner. He drove a truck that sounded like it was dying. He lived in a shack with my daughter. If he had $45 in his bank account, I would be surprised. Do not sit there and insult my intelligence by pretending he was a secret millionaire. Ebony giggled nervously, but her eyes were darting around the room, looking unsure. "Yeah, I mean, Dante fixed my radiator last year. He charged me for parts. Would a millionaire charge his sister-in-law for a radiator hose? Mr. Sterling did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply pressed a button on the small console built into the table. The automated blinds on the floor-to-ceiling windows began to lower, dimming the bright Atlanta sun. A large projection screen descended silently from the ceiling behind him. "I think it is time you met the real Dante Reynolds," Mr. Sterling said softly. The screen flickered to life. It was not a picture of a dirty mechanic in a garage. It was a high-resolution video of a pristine, sterile laboratory. Men and women in white lab coats were moving around checking monitors and adjusting complex machinery. In the center of the frame, wearing a clean blue engineer's suit and safety glasses, was Dante. He was pointing at a 3D schematic on a tablet, directing a team of technicians. He looked authoritative, he looked brilliant. He looked like a king in his castle. The logo DR Logistics and Engineering faded onto the screen in sleek silver letters. My mother stopped laughing. Her mouth hung slightly open. Mr. Sterling stood up and walked over to the screen using a laser pointer to circle the logo. Dante Reynolds was not a mechanic. He explained, his voice smooth and educational, as if he were teaching a class to slow children. He was a mechanical engineer with a dual doctorate from MIT. He had a passion for high-performance combustion engines. You saw grease on his hands because he insisted on testing his prototypes himself. He did not fix cars for a living. He designed the systems that make them run faster and cooler than anything else on the market. The slide changed. It showed a race car on a NASCAR track blurring past the camera. Then it showed a Formula One car. Then a military transport vehicle. Mr. Sterling continued. Dante held 12 exclusive patents for thermal regulation systems. Every time a car crosses the finish line at Daytona, Dante got paid. Every time the military upgrades their transport fleet, Dante got paid. That garage you despise so much, that was not a repair shop. That was his private research and development facility. It houses $20 million worth of prototyping equipment. I looked at Preston. He was not laughing. He was staring at the screen with the intensity of a man watching a car crash. Sweat had begun to bead on his forehead, glistening under the dim lights. He knew what R&D facilities cost. He knew what military contracts looked like. The arrogance was melting off him like wax near a fire. Mr. Sterling clicked the remote again. A pie chart appeared. It was broken into slices labeled real estate stocks and liquid assets. But Dante was not just an inventor, Sterling said. He was a diversification genius. He pointed to the blue slice of the chart. While you were mocking his truck, Dante was buying commercial real estate in developing districts. He owns 3 warehouses near the airport. He owns the land under 2 shopping centers in Midtown. And he was an early angel investor in a little company you might have heard of called NVIDIA. Ebony let out a small, strangled squeak. NVIDIA, she whispered. Sterling nodded. He bought in 10 years ago. He never sold. That portfolio alone is worth $12 million today. The room fell silent again. This time it was not the silence of confusion. It was the silence of horror. My family was doing the math. They were replaying every insult, every sneer, every time they had made Dante sit at the kids' table or eat in the kitchen. They were realizing that the man they had treated like a servant could have bought and sold their entire existence 10 times over without blinking. My mother looked ill. She clutched her pearls, her face turning a shade of gray that clashed with her crimson suit. But why, she stammered, her voice shaking. Why did he live like that? Why did he let us treat him like dirt? I spoke up then. My voice was calm, cutting through the thick atmosphere of the room. Because he wanted to see if you would love him for him, Mom, I said. He wanted to know if you were capable of respecting a human being just because they were human, not because of what they could buy you. I looked at her directly. And you failed. You failed every single day for 10 years. Ebony started to cry. It wasn't a sad cry. It was the selfish, panicked cry of a spoiled child who realizes she just threw away a winning lottery ticket. I didn't know, she sobbed. Jasmine, you should have told us. It is not fair. We would have treated him differently if we knew he was important. That is exactly the point, Ebony, I said coldly. You only treat important people with kindness. Dante was important to me when he had nothing. That is why I am sitting here and you are sitting there. Preston cleared his throat. It was a wet, rattling sound. He was trying to salvage something. He sat up straighter, adjusting his tie, trying to pull the mask of the successful businessman back onto his face. Okay, look, he said, his voice cracking slightly. So the guy had money. Fine. Surprise. Good for him. But that doesn't change why we are here. We are here to talk about the garage transfer and the insurance. If Dante was so rich, surely he wouldn't mind us having that old building, right? I mean, he clearly didn't need it. Mr. Sterling turned his gaze toward Preston. The look in the lawyer's eyes changed. It went from professional to predatory. He clicked the remote one last time. The screen went black. Then a single document appeared. It was a corporate registration filing. Actually, Mr. Vance. I am glad you brought up business, Sterling said, Because Dante had a very keen interest in your business. Preston frowned. My business. TechStart. What about it? We are a software logistics company. We have nothing to do with engines. Sterling walked slowly around the table until he was standing right behind Preston's chair. Dante believed in supporting family, Sterling said, even when that family was ungrateful. 3 years ago, when TechStart was failing, when you couldn't get a bank loan to keep the lights on, you received a miraculous injection of capital from a holding company called Shadow Ventures LLC. Do you remember that? Preston nodded slowly. Yeah. Shadow Ventures. They were our angel investors. They saved us. I never met the principal owner. They just sent the checks and let me run the show. Sterling leaned down. He placed a hand on the back of Preston's chair. He leaned close to Preston's ear, but he spoke loud enough for the whole room to hear. Shadow Ventures LLC is a wholly owned subsidiary of DR Logistics, Sterling whispered. Preston froze. His eyes bulged. That means, Sterling continued, straightening up and walking back to the head of the table, that Dante Reynolds did not just fix your sister-in-law's car. He fixed your company. He bought 51% of TechStart to keep you from going bankrupt. Sterling pressed a button on the remote and the document zoomed in on the signature line at the bottom. It was signed by Dante Reynolds. The lawyer looked at Preston with a smile that was all teeth. Dante Reynolds is the majority shareholder of your company, Mr. Vance. He is the silent partner you have been bragging about to your country club friends. And as the executor of his estate, and on behalf of his sole heir, Mrs. Jasmine Reynolds, Sterling pointed a finger directly at Preston's sweating face. We are very concerned about the way you have been managing our company, specifically the $2 million in company funds that seem to have disappeared into offshore gambling sites in the last 6 months. Preston stopped breathing. The room spun. The arrogant, successful CEO was gone. In his place sat a man who realized he had just spent 3 years insulting his own boss, and that boss had left the power to fire him in the hands of the woman he had just tried to bribe with $5,000. The silence in the boardroom shattered the moment Preston slammed his fist onto the mahogany table. The sound was like a gunshot, causing the crystal water pitcher to jump and Ebony to flinch violently in her seat. Preston stood up, his face a mask of contorted rage that had replaced his usual look of smug superiority. He pointed a shaking finger at Mr. Sterling, veins bulging in his neck as he screamed that this was a lie. He shouted that it was slander and he would sue this entire firm into the ground for defamation. He looked around the room with wild eyes, accusing us of fabricating documents, claiming that a mechanic could not possibly own a controlling stake in a tech company. He was loud, he was aggressive, and he was terrified. Mr. Sterling did not flinch. He did not call for security yet. He simply waited for Preston to run out of breath. He watched the man unravel with the dispassionate gaze of a surgeon looking at a tumor. When Preston finally stopped shouting, chest heaving, Mr. Sterling reached into his leather folder again. He pulled out a thick stack of papers bound with a heavy black clip. He slid them across the polished wood until they came to rest directly in front of Preston. These are the forensic accounting reports from the last fiscal quarter, Mr. Sterling said, his voice cutting through the tension like a razor blade. They detail a series of wire transfers from the TechStart corporate operating account to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. From there, the money was moved to 3 separate online gambling platforms. Preston stared at the binder. He did not open it. He knew exactly what was inside. Mr. Sterling continued reciting the numbers from memory. $2.1 million, Mr. Vance. That is the amount you have siphoned from the company in the last 6 months. You drained the payroll account. You drained the R&D budget. You even dipped into the employee pension fund. Ebony let out a gasp. She turned to look at her fiancé, her eyes wide with horror. Preston? She whispered. The pension fund. But you told me the company was having a record year. You told me we were buying the lake house with your bonus. Preston ignored her. He was staring at Mr. Sterling, sweat dripping down his temple. It was a loan, Preston stammered, his voice losing its volume. I was going to pay it back. I just had a bad run of luck. The market turned on me. I just needed time." "You did not have time," Mr. Sterling corrected him. "The company was insolvent 3 months ago. Your checks were bouncing. Your suppliers were threatening to sue. By all logic, TechStart should have shuttered its doors, and you should have been facing a federal indictment for embezzlement back in February." Sterling leaned forward, locking eyes with the trembling man. "Do you want to know why you are not in prison right now? Do you want to know why your employees still receive their paychecks every Friday?" Preston did not answer. He looked like a trapped animal. "Because Dante Reynolds stepped in," Sterling said. "Every time you stole, Dante covered the loss. Every time you lost a bet, Dante transferred personal funds into the corporate account to keep the ledger balanced. He did it anonymously through Shadow Ventures. He kept the lights on. He kept your secret. He kept you employed." "Why?" Preston whispered. The question hung in the air, filled with genuine confusion. Why would he do that? I treated him like garbage. I mocked him to his face. Why would he save me? I spoke up then. It was the first time I had opened my mouth since the meeting began. My voice felt rusty, but it came out strong, resonating in the quiet room. "He didn't do it for you, Preston." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw how small he was. "He did it for Ebony." I turned my gaze to my sister. She was pale, clutching the edge of the table. "Dante knew you were marrying him, Ebony," I said softly. "He knew how much you loved the idea of this perfect, wealthy life. He knew that if Preston went to jail, your world would collapse. He told me that everyone deserves a chance to be happy, even if they are flawed. He wanted to give Preston time to turn it around so that you wouldn't have to suffer." I felt tears pricking my eyes, not for them, but for the sheer magnitude of my husband's heart. "He protected you." I continued, looking back at Preston. "He protected a man who called him a grease monkey. He protected a man who tried to bribe his widow with $5,000 to steal his property. And you repaid him by trying to rob his grave before the dirt was even settled." The truth of my words seemed to physically strike Preston. He sank back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. But my mother was not looking at Preston. She was looking at me. Her face had turned a deep, violent shade of purple. She was shaking, not with shame, but with a fury so intense it made the air around her vibrate. She could not process what she was hearing. Her brain refused to accept that her golden boy was a thief and her scapegoat daughter was the hero. It broke the narrative she had built her entire life around. "You are a liar," Patricia screamed. She stood up so fast, her chair tipped over backward with a loud crash. "This is all a setup." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You are jealous. You have always been jealous of Ebony. You are making this up to humiliate us. Preston is a genius. He is a tech mogul. He would never steal." "Mom, stop," Ebony whispered, looking at the accounting binder. "The numbers are right here." "Shut up," Patricia yelled at her own favorite child. "Do not let her brainwash you. This is what she does. She is manipulative. She drags everyone down to her level because she cannot stand to see you shine." She turned her wild eyes back to me. "You think you are so smart with your fake lawyer and your fake files? You are nothing. You are just the wife of a dead mechanic. You are trying to ruin your sister's wedding because you are miserable and alone." She began to move toward me. Her hands were curled into claws. Her eyes were glazed over with madness. "I am going to slap that look off your face," she shrieked. "I am going to teach you to respect your betters." She lunged. She moved with surprising speed for a woman in heels fueled by pure adrenaline and hatred. She reached across the corner of the table, her hand raised to strike me. I did not flinch. I did not move. I watched her come, but she never reached me. A massive hand clamped onto her wrist. 2 uniformed security guards had materialized from the side doors the moment Preston had started shouting. One of them, a man with shoulders like a linebacker, had intercepted my mother mid-swing. He held her arm firmly, stopping her inches from my face. "Ma'am, that is enough," the guard said, his voice deep and authoritative. "Let me go!" Patricia screamed, thrashing against his grip. She is my daughter. I have the right to discipline her. She is lying about my family. Sit down, ma'am, the guard ordered, guiding her forcefully back toward her side of the table. Or we will escort you out of the building and hand you over to the Atlanta Police Department for assault. Patricia struggled for a second longer, but the reality of the uniform and the physical strength of the guard finally pierced her delusion. She slumped. The guard released her, and she fell into the chair next to Preston, breathing heavily, her hair disheveled, her chest heaving. She glared at me with pure, unadulterated loathing. Mr. Sterling watched the entire scene without standing up. He waited until my mother was seated. He waited until the guard stepped back to the wall, ready to intervene again. He waited until the only sound in the room was my mother's ragged breathing. Then he adjusted his cuffs. He looked at my mother with a coldness that was terrifying. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "I would advise you to conserve your energy." He reached for another file on his desk. This one was red. "We have discussed Mr. Vance's financial crimes. We have discussed your daughter's inheritance, but we have not yet discussed your situation." He opened the red file. "You seem to be under the impression that you live in a mansion in Buckhead that you own. You seem to believe you are a wealthy woman who can look down on others." Sterling pulled out a deed and a foreclosure notice from 5 years ago. "We need to talk about the fact that you have been living on my client's charity for half a decade. And we need to talk about what happens now that you have tried to assault his widow." My mother stopped breathing, her eyes fixed on the red file. The anger vanished, replaced instantly by the cold, hollow realization that the ground she was standing on had just disappeared. The red file sat on the mahogany table like a brick of radioactive material. The room was still vibrating from the revelation of Preston's theft, but Mr. Sterling did not give them a moment to recover. He did not let the air settle. He turned his gaze toward my parents, specifically my mother Patricia, who was currently slumped in her chair trying to process the fact that her son-in-law was a criminal and her deceased son-in-law was a multi-millionaire. Mr. Sterling placed his hand on the red folder. "Let us talk about the house, Mrs. Reynolds," he said. The tone of his voice was different now. It was not the sharp, accusatory tone he had used with Preston. It was quieter. It was almost sad. My mother blinked her eyes, focusing on the file. "What about the house?" she snapped, her defensive instincts kicking in despite her shock. "It is our house. We have lived there for 30 years. It is the family seat." "Ah, yes," Sterling said. "The Buckhead estate, 5 bedrooms, 6 baths, a heated pool. It is the symbol of your status in Atlanta society, isn't it? It is the reason you felt comfortable looking down on Dante, because he lived in a bungalow and you lived in a mansion." My father, Robert, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He looked at the file, and I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He knew. He had always known, but he had let my mother rewrite history because it was easier than facing the truth. Sterling opened the folder. He pulled out a document that was yellowed with age. It was stamped with a large, ugly seal that read, "Notice of Default. 5 years ago, your husband made a series of bad investments," Sterling said, sliding the paper across the table. "He bet heavily on commercial real estate right before the market dipped. You leveraged the house, you leveraged your retirement, and you lost." My mother stared at the paper. Her hand went to her mouth. "This is the foreclosure notice from the bank," Sterling continued. "You were 60 days away from eviction. The sheriff was scheduled to come and put your antique furniture on the curb. Do you remember that panic, Patricia? Do you remember the nights you couldn't sleep, terrified that your neighbors would find out you were destitute?" My mother did not speak. She was trembling. She remembered. I remembered it too, though at the time they had told me it was just a temporary liquidity issue. They had never told me they were about to be homeless. "But the sheriff never came, did he?" Sterling asked. "No," my father whispered. His voice was barely audible. "No. The bank called. They said an investor had purchased the debt." Sterling nodded. "Correct. A private holding company stepped in at the 11th hour. They paid off the entire mortgage. They paid off the back taxes. They cleared the liens. He pulled out another document. This one was a lease agreement. And then this investor did something very unusual, Sterling said. Instead of evicting you, instead of selling the house for a profit, they offered you a leaseback agreement. They allowed you to stay in the home. They allowed you to keep the title in your name publicly so that nobody in your social circle would know you had lost everything. Sterling pointed to the bottom of the page. And the rent? Do you recall the monthly rent this investor charged you? My father looked down at his hands. $1, he said. $1 a month. The room went deadly silent. Even Preston, who was still burying his face in his hands, looked up. $1, Ebony squeaked. You guys pay $1 a rent. I pay $3,000 for my apartment. My mother was pale. She looked like a ghost. She knew where this was going. She was trying to shake her head, trying to deny the reality that was barreling toward her like a freight train. Who, she whispered. Who did that? We thought it was an old friend of Robert's. We thought it was someone from the golf club. Mr. Sterling smiled. It was a sad, weary smile. No, Mrs. Reynolds. Your friends at the golf club would have laughed at you. They would have bought your house and turned it into a rental property. He turned the document around so the signature line faced her. The holding company is called Second Chance Properties, Sterling said. It is a shell company created for the sole purpose of managing this one asset. And the sole proprietor of Second Chance Properties, he tapped the signature, is Dante Reynolds. My mother stopped breathing. The air left her lungs in a sharp hiss. No, she gasped. No, that isn't possible. He was poor. We bought him dinner. Sterling slammed the folder shut. The sound made everyone jump. He bought you a life. Sterling's voice thundered, losing its calm for the first time. For 5 years, Dante Reynolds has paid your property taxes. He has paid for your roof repairs. He has paid for the landscaping that you brag about to your friends. He saved you from humiliation. He saved you from homelessness. And he did it anonymously because he knew that your pride was the only thing you had left. I watched my father. He let out a long, broken moan. He clutched his chest, his face crumbling into a mask of absolute shame. He slumped forward, his elbows hitting the table, burying his face in his arms. He was weeping. He was crying because he realized that the man he had barred from family photos was the only reason he had a roof over his head. But my mother was not crying yet. She was staring at me. Her eyes were wide, filled with a horror that went beyond money. It was the horror of a narcissist who sees her reflection clearly for the first time. You knew, she whispered to me. You knew this whole time. I looked at her. I sat up straight in my chair, feeling the strength of Dante beside me. I found out 3 days ago, I said. When I went through his files for the funeral. I stood up. I walked slowly around the table until I was standing right next to her. I wanted her to look at me. I wanted her to see the daughter she had thrown away. He never told me, Mom, I said softly. He never threw it in my face. He never used it to win an argument. He sat at your dinner table every Sunday. He listened to you mock his job. He listened to you call his truck a piece of junk. He listened to you tell me I should have married a doctor. I leaned down, my face inches from hers. He sat there and ate your roast beef, knowing that he owned the table you were serving it on. He knew he owned the chair you were sitting in. He knew that the roof over your head was there because of his checkbook. And he never said a word. Because he loved me, and because he pitied you. My mother flinched as if I had slapped her. But here is the part I cannot forgive, Mom. I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was colder than the grave. You have been living in my husband's house for 5 years. You have been sleeping in safety because of his money. You have maintained your reputation because of his silence. And yet, when he died, you couldn't even give him 1 hour of your time. I pointed to the window toward the direction of the cemetery. You went to a party, I said. You drank champagne. You laughed. You worried about flower arrangements. You left me to bury the man who saved your life all by myself. My father let out a sob, his shoulders shaking. My mother looked up at me. Her lips were trembling. She tried to speak, to offer some excuse, to find some way to twist this back into her favor, but the words died in her throat. There was no spin for this. There was no lie big enough to cover the magnitude of her ingratitude. Jasmine, she choked out. We didn't know. That is not an excuse, I said. It is a confession. You didn't know because you didn't care to look. You judged him by his hands, not his heart. And now you have lost both. I straightened up and looked at Mr. Sterling. Show them the rest, I said. Finish it. Sterling nodded. He opened the file again. As I mentioned, Sterling said, his voice returning to businesslike precision. The lease agreement was for 5 years. It expired yesterday. He looked at my parents. Dante had prepared a renewal. He was going to let you stay for another 5 years. He had the papers ready to sign on his desk the day he died. Sterling held up a document. It was unsigned. But he died before he could execute it, which means the property has reverted to the estate. It is now an asset controlled by his sole heir. Sterling handed the unsigned lease to me. The fate of the house is now entirely up to Mrs. Jasmine Reynolds, he said. I took the paper. I looked at it. I looked at the signatures of my parents from 5 years ago, desperate scrawls of people trying to save their image. My mother looked at the paper in my hands. She looked at me. For the first time in my life, she wasn't looking at me with disappointment. She was looking at me with terror. She realized that the power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted. I held her world in my hands. Jasmine, she breathed. Baby, please. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had demanded I sign away my husband's insurance money an hour ago. I looked at the woman who had tried to slap me for telling the truth. I didn't say anything. I just placed the unsigned lease on the table. And then slowly, deliberately, I pushed it away from me, toward the shredder that sat in the corner of the office. The message was clear. There would be no renewal. There would be no more $1 rent. The landlord was dead, and the new owner was done being the family doormat. The sound of the shredder devouring the lease agreement faded, leaving a silence in the boardroom that was heavier than lead. My mother was paralyzed, her eyes locked on the machine that had just eaten her security. My father was weeping silently into his hands. But Ebony was vibrating. The shock that had silenced her initially was now morphing into a frantic, cornered animal aggression. She could not accept a world where she was not the princess. She could not accept a reality where the sister she bullied was the landlord of her life. Ebony stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. Her face was flushed a patchy, ugly red. "This is insane!" she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "I do not believe a word of this. You are lying. Both of you are lying." She pointed a shaking finger at Mr. Sterling and then at me. "This is a scam. It has to be. Dante was a moron. He fixed cars. He did not have millions of dollars. You forged these documents. You probably hired this actor to play a lawyer in a rented office just to scare us." She turned to look at Mom, desperate for validation. "Mom, tell her she is crazy. Jasmine probably poisoned him or used some kind of voodoo to get him to sign these fake papers. She has always been weird. She has always been jealous of us. She is trying to steal our house." Ebony did not wait for an answer. The delusion was too strong. In her mind, if she destroyed the paper, she destroyed the truth. She lunged across the table. Her target was the thick leather-bound will that sat in front of Mr. Sterling. It was the master document, the source of all this misery. She grabbed the binder with both hands. Her fingernails dug into the leather. She tried to rip the pages out, snarling like a wild cat. "I am not letting you take what is mine," she shrieked. "This is fraud. I am going to tear this up and then I am going to call the police. I did not move to stop her. I did not have to. Mr. Sterling simply sat back in his chair. He did not wrestle her for the binder. He did not call for the guards. He watched her struggle with the heavy binding, watching her rip one of the cover pages in her frenzy. He waited until she had the paper in her hand, panting, looking triumphant. Then he spoke. His voice was calm, devoid of emotion, and amplified by the perfect acoustics of the room. "Ms. Reynolds," he said, "I would strongly advise you to look up." Ebony froze. She was breathing hard, clutching the torn paper to her chest. She looked up. Directly above the conference table, concealed within the sleek design of the lighting fixture, was a small black dome. A red light blinked steadily on its surface. "This entire meeting is being recorded for legal and security purposes," Mr. Sterling informed her. "The footage is being uploaded in real time to a secure cloud server." He adjusted his glasses, looking at her with a mix of disappointment and professional boredom. "You have just been recorded attempting to destroy a last will and testament during a formal legal proceeding. That is a felony, Ms. Reynolds. It is considered tampering with evidence and obstruction of justice. If I press this button to call the police, you will be leaving this building in handcuffs, and you will likely spend the next 3 to 5 years in a federal prison." Ebony dropped the paper as if it had turned into a burning coal. She scrambled back from the table, her hands flying up in a surrender motion. I didn't, I was just," she stammered, backing away until she hit the wall. "Sit down," Sterling ordered. The command cracked like a whip. Ebony collapsed into the nearest chair. She looked small. The bridal white dress she wore now looked ridiculous, a costume for a play that had been cancelled. Mr. Sterling smoothed the cover of the binder. He picked up the torn page and placed it carefully back inside. "It is fortunate that this is merely a copy," he said. "The original is locked in a vault in the basement. Your temper tantrum accomplished nothing but adding a potential criminal charge to your resume." He looked around the room. He looked at Preston, who was still catatonic. He looked at my parents, who were broken. And he looked at Ebony, who was terrified. "Dante knew you," Sterling said softly. "He knew all of you. He knew exactly how you would react. He predicted the greed. He predicted the anger. He predicted the denial." Sterling turned a few pages in the binder until he reached a section marked with a yellow sticky note. "And because he knew you, he added a very special clause to this will. It is a conditional bequest. We call it the respect clause." I felt a lump form in my throat. I knew this part. This was the part that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Dante was a better human being than any of them deserved. Mr. Sterling began to read. "To my wife's family, Robert, Patricia, and Ebony Reynolds, I leave the option to forgive the entirety of the debt associated with the property at 12 Oakwood Lane." My mother's head snapped up. Hope, desperate and pathetic, flared in her eyes. "Did you hear that?" she gasped, grabbing my father's arm. "He forgave the debt. We can keep the house." Mr. Sterling held up a hand. "I am not finished reading, Mrs. Reynolds." He looked back at the document. "I offer this debt forgiveness and the transfer of the property deed to their names free and clear, subject to one single condition." The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the hard drive recording their shame. "The condition is simple," Sterling read. "They must treat my wife Jasmine with the dignity she deserves, and specifically in the event of my untimely death, they must attend my funeral services. They must stand by her side. They must show the world that they value the family bond over their own vanity. If they attend my burial and pay their respects, the house is theirs. It is my final gift to the people who raised the woman I love." Mr. Sterling stopped reading. He slowly closed the binder. The sound of the heavy cover hitting the rest of the pages was a dull thud that sounded like a coffin lid closing. He looked at my mother. "The funeral was Friday, Mrs. Reynolds." My mother let out a whimper. "The burial was at 10 a.m. Sterling continued. "I was there. Jasmine was there. The pastor was there." He looked at Preston. I believe you were at a dress fitting, or perhaps tasting cake. He looked at Ebony. I believe you were posting photos of flower arrangements on Instagram. He looked back at my mother. And you were calling my client to harass her for insurance money while she was standing over her husband's grave. Mr. Sterling placed both hands flat on the table. There is a clause in the contract that states if the condition is not met, the offer is null and void. The debt is reinstated in full immediately, and the property reverts to the estate to be liquidated. My mother began to hyperventilate. She clawed at her throat. No, she wheezed. No, please. We didn't know. If we had known about the house, if we had known he was rich, we would have come. We would have been there. That is the tragedy, isn't it? Sterling said cold. You would have come for the money. You would have come for the house. But you wouldn't come for him. And you wouldn't come for your daughter. He picked up the red file containing the foreclosure documents and the expired lease. He dropped it on top of the closed will. RAM. The sound echoed. The condition was not met. Sterling announced his voice final. The respect clause is void. You do not get the house. You do not get the forgiveness. What you get is an eviction notice. He looked at his watch. And since the lease expired yesterday, you are currently trespassing on my client's property. Ebony burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. Preston stared at the wall, seeing his life disintegrate. My father simply closed his eyes, accepting the punishment he knew he deserved. But my mother looked at me. She looked at me with the eyes of a drowning woman who realizes the lifeboat just sailed away because she was too proud to grab the rope. Jasmine, she whispered. I looked at her. I felt nothing. No hate, no love. Just the emptiness of a transaction that had finally been settled. It is over, Mom, I said. You made your choice on Friday. Now you have to live with it. The shredder had finished its meal, but the destruction in the room was just beginning. I turned my attention to the man sitting at the far end of the table. Preston Vance. The man who had walked into this room with his feet on the table and a sneer on his lips was now a trembling wreck. He was staring at the closed door where the security guard stood, his skin the color of old paste. He knew what was coming. He knew that the shield of arrogance he had worn for years had been shattered by a dead man's foresight. Mr. Sterling slid a single sheet of paper toward me. It was crisp white and deadly. It was a corporate resolution document for TechStart. It required only one signature to become law. The signature of the majority shareholder. I picked up the heavy fountain pen that Dante had given me for our first anniversary. I felt the weight of it in my hand. It felt like a sword. I looked at Preston. I wanted him to see me do it. I wanted him to watch the exact moment his house of cards collapsed. Preston, I said. My voice was not loud, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like thunder. Look at me. He slowly lifted his head. His eyes were red-rimmed and terrified. You stole from your employees, I said. You stole from the pension fund. You stole from the man who saved your career. And then when he died, you tried to steal from his widow. I uncapped the pen. The sound was a sharp click. You thought Dante was weak because he was kind. You thought I was stupid because I was quiet. But you forgot one thing, Preston. Kindness has a limit, Zay. And silence is just a way to hear the truth more clearly. I pressed the pen to the paper. I signed my name, Jasmine Reynolds. I added the date. It is done, I said, capping the pen and pushing the document back to Mr. Sterling. I stood up and looked down at him. As the owner of 51% of TechStart, I am hereby exercising my right to remove the current executive leadership. Preston Vance, you are fired, effective immediately. You are stripped of your title, your salary, and your access to company accounts. Preston let out a strangled sound. Half sob, half gasp. Jasmine, wait, he pleaded. You can't do this. The investors, the market. I am not finished. I cut him off. Mr. Sterling picked up the thread, his voice like a hammer. Furthermore, Mr. Vance, the estate of Dante Reynolds, is filing a civil lawsuit against you for the recovery of $2.1 million in embezzled funds. We have already contacted the district attorney's office regarding the criminal charges. Your assets have been frozen as of this morning to prevent flight. Frozen, Preston whispered. What do you mean frozen? I mean you have $0, Preston Sterling said. Your bank accounts are locked. Your credit cards are canceled. Your leased car downstairs is currently being towed. Preston looked around the room frantically. He looked at the window as if looking for an escape route. Then his eyes landed on Ebony. My sister was sitting frozen in her chair, her face a mask of shock. She was clutching her white dress, the dress she had planned to wear to her rehearsal dinner. Ebony Preston gasped, scrambling out of his chair. He rushed toward her, falling to his knees beside her seat. Baby, you have to talk to her. Tell her she is crazy. We can fix this. We just need a little time. He reached out to grab her hand. His palms were sweaty. He looked desperate, pathetic, a drowning man trying to pull someone down with him. Ebony, please, he begged. We are getting married in 2 months. We are a team. We can get through this. Your parents can help us. We can use the house equity. He stopped. He remembered the house was gone. He remembered the parents were broke. Ebony, I love you, he cried. Just stand by me. I watched my sister. I watched the woman who had spent her entire life chasing status. I watched the woman who had mocked my marriage to a mechanic because she wanted a prince. I watched her look at the man kneeling on the floor. She did not see a prince anymore. She saw a pauper. She saw a criminal. She saw a man who could no longer buy her the lifestyle she felt entitled to. Ebony pulled her hand away as if he had burned her. She recoiled, pressing her back against the chair. Don't touch me, she screamed. Preston froze. Ebony, get away from me, she yelled, her face twisting in disgust. You are broke. You stole money. You are going to prison, but we are in love, Preston stammered. I am not marrying a felon, Ebony shrieked. I am not marrying a man with no money. Do you know how embarrassing this is? Do you know what my friends will say? You lied to me, Preston. You told me you were rich. She stood up, shaking her dress to make sure he hadn't touched it. I am done, she said coldly. The wedding is off. Do not call me. Do not come near me. Preston slumped back on his heels. He looked destroyed. The rejection from the woman he had stolen millions to impress was the final blow. Mr. Sterling nodded to the security guards. Gentlemen, please remove Mr. Vance from the premises. The 2 guards stepped forward. They hauled Preston up by his armpits. He did not fight them. He went limp, his legs dragging on the expensive carpet. He was weeping openly now, a broken man who had lost everything in the span of 30 minutes because he tried to take too much. As they dragged him through the glass doors, he looked back at me one last time. There was no hate in his eyes anymore, just regret. But it was too late for regret. The elevator doors opened and they shoved him inside. The doors slid shut, cutting off his sobbing wail. The room fell silent again. The air conditioner hummed. The shredder sat in the corner full of paper. And the 4 of us were left alone. Me, the lawyer, and the parents who had watched it all happen. The departure of Preston changed the atmosphere in the room instantly. The chaotic energy was gone, replaced by a suffocating heavy dread. It was just family now. The blood relatives, the people who were supposed to protect each other. My father was still sitting with his head in his hands, unable to look at me. But my mother was a survivor. She was a chameleon. And now that her golden boy was gone, now that her financial safety net had been shredded, she did the only thing she knew how to do. She pivoted. She took a deep breath. She wiped the frantic look from her face. She smoothed her hair. And then she looked at me with tear-filled eyes, not the angry tears from before, but soft, pleading, manipulative tears. Jazz, she whispered. Her voice trembled perfectly. She stood up and walked slowly toward me, reaching out her hands. "Oh, my poor baby girl," she said. "I am so sorry." I stood still. I did not reach back. "Mom," I asked, my voice flat. She nodded, letting a tear roll down her cheek. "We were tricked, Jasmine," she said, her voice gaining confidence as she spun her new web. "That man, that horrible Preston, he deceived us all. He lied to your father and me. He told us Dante was bad. He told us Dante was ruining your life. We only wanted to protect you." She took a step closer, ignoring the coldness radiating from me. "You know you are my favorite, right? You have always been the sensible one. The smart one. I knew you would figure it out. Thank God you saved us from him. Thank God you saved Ebony." She glanced at Ebony, who was sitting in the corner sulking, and then looked back at me with a desperate, hungry intensity. "We are a family, Jasmine. Blood is thicker than water. We make mistakes, but we forgive. That is what we do." She reached out to touch my arm. "Now about the house. Surely you were just trying to scare us, right? You wouldn't really kick your own parents out on the street. You are a good daughter. You are the most dutiful daughter I have. You wouldn't do that to your mother." I looked at her hand on my sleeve. It was the same hand that had tried to slap me 20 minutes ago. It was the same hand that had clawed at my purse for the insurance papers. I stepped back. Her hand fell to her side. I closed my eyes for a second. The image of the boardroom vanished. Instead, I saw the cemetery again. I felt the cold rain soaking into my black dress. I felt the mud seeping into my shoes. I saw the empty chairs. I heard the silence where my family's voices should have been. Then I opened my eyes. I looked at the crystal water pitcher on the table. I imagined it was the champagne they had been drinking while I was lowering Dante into the ground. "When I called you 50 times on Friday, Mom," I said quietly. "Where were you?" Patricia blinked. I told you, Jasmine. We were busy with the engagement." "No." I cut her off. "You were drinking wine. You were laughing. You were choosing centerpieces." I took a breath. The anger was gone. In its place was a clarity so sharp it hurt. I stood alone in the rain. "Mom." I buried the man who loved me, and I turned around to see who was there to hold me up. And do you know what I saw? I saw nothing. I looked at my father. I saw nobody. I looked back at her. "You made your choice that day. You chose the party. You chose the image. You chose the lie." "But Jasmine," she pleaded, her voice rising in panic. "We are your parents. You owe us. I owe you nothing," I said. My voice filled the room. "Dante paid my debt. He paid it for 5 years. He paid it with every dollar of rent he didn't charge you. He paid it with every insult he swallowed. He bought you 5 years of dignity, and you repaid him with contempt." Mr. Sterling handed me the final folder. It was the eviction notice. "I am not kicking you out because I am cruel, Mom," I said. "I am kicking you out because it is business. And unlike you, I respect my husband's business." I placed the folder on the table. "The lease is expired. The debt forgiveness is void. You are currently squatting in a property owned by the Dante Reynolds estate." I looked at her hard and unyielding. "I am giving you 30 days. That is more generosity than you deserve. You have 30 days to vacate the premises." "But we have nowhere to go," she shrieked. "Or," I continued, ignoring her outburst, "you can buy the house." Her eyes lit up for a second. "Buy it?" "Yes," I said. "At fair market value, plus the back interest on the loan Dante paid off." I looked at Mr. Sterling. "What is the current valuation?" $3.2 million, Sterling said. I looked back at my mother. "You have 30 days to come up with $3.2 million. If the money is wired to the estate account by the deadline, you can keep your mansion. You can keep your status. You can keep pretending you are the queens of Atlanta." I paused. "But if you are $1 short, or 1 day late, the sheriff will be there. And this time there is no silent partner to stop him." This time the neighbors will see everything. My mother collapsed into the chair. She knew. She knew they didn't have $3 million. She knew they didn't even have 3,000. She was ruined. The mask was ripped off, and underneath was just a terrified aging woman with no money and no friends. I picked up my old muddy purse from the floor. I picked up the file containing Dante's legacy. I turned to leave. "Jasmine," my father called out. His voice was hoarse. "Where are you going?" I stopped at the door. I didn't look back. "I am going to visit my husband," I said. "I have some good news to tell him." I walked out of the glass doors. I walked past the receptionist. I walked into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, cutting off the view of my weeping mother and my broken sister, I finally let out a breath I had been holding for 10 years. I was an orphan now. I had no parents. I had no sister. But as the elevator descended, taking me back to the world, I didn't feel empty. I felt full. I felt free. I had lost a family that never loved me, but I had found the woman Dante always knew I could be, and that was a trade I would make 1,000 times over. The elevator doors pinged softly opening onto the subterranean gray of the parking garage. The air down here was cool and smelled of gasoline and dust, a sharp contrast to the filtered, expensive air of the penthouse office I had just left. I walked toward the designated spot where the valet had parked Dante's truck. My heels clicked against the concrete, a steady, rhythmic sound that echoed in the vast emptiness. I felt lighter with every step, as if I had left 100 pounds of dead weight back on the 50th floor. "Jasmine, wait." The shout echoed off the concrete walls, frantic and shrill. I did not stop walking. I knew that voice. I had spent 30 years responding to that voice, jumping every time it commanded me. But today, my legs kept moving forward. "Please." The sound of running footsteps got closer. A hand grabbed my elbow, spinning me around. It was Ebony. She looked like a wreck. Her hair, which had been perfectly coiffed an hour ago, was coming loose from its pins. Her eyes were wild, rimmed with smeared mascara. She was out of breath, her chest heaving beneath the white dress that now seemed like a cruel joke. "You can't just leave," she gasped, holding onto my arm as if I were a life raft. "You can't do this to me." I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. I gently but firmly pried her fingers off. "I can, Ebony," I said calmly. "And I just did." She stared at me, her mouth trembling. Panic was setting in, real panic. The kind that comes when you realize the safety net you thought was woven of steel was actually made of cobwebs. But what about me?" she stammered. "Preston is gone. He is going to jail. He stole everything. The wedding is off. My friend saw everything on the live stream before Mom cut the feed. Everyone is laughing at me, Jasmine. My reputation is ruined." "That sounds like a personal problem," I said, turning back toward the truck. "No." She jumped in front of me, blocking my path. "You have to help me. You have $45 million. That is our money. It belongs to the family." "It belongs to Dante's estate," I corrected her. "And you are not part of his estate. You made sure of that when you decided his funeral was less important than your flower arrangements." Ebony's face crumpled. She realized that anger wasn't working, so she switched tactics. She switched to the weapon she had used against me since we were children. The victim card. "Jasmine, please," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "You do not understand. I am pregnant." I stopped. I looked at her stomach. I looked back at her eyes. I saw the flicker of deception there, the desperate scramble to find a lie big enough to make me stay. "I am," she lied, her voice rising in pitch. "I am going to have a baby. You can't let your niece or nephew grow up on the street. You have to buy the house for us. You have to give me an allowance. You always help me. You always give in. You are the big sister. It is your job to take care of me." I stared at her. For a moment I saw the little girl she used to be. The little girl I had protected from bullies. The little girl I had helped with homework. But then I saw the woman she had become. The woman who had laughed when I was handed a bill I couldn't pay. The woman who had sneered at my husband's casket. I stepped closer to her. "You are not pregnant, Ebony," I said softly. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. "And even if you were, that would not change anything." Her jaw dropped. "What? How can you be so cruel?" "I am not being cruel," I said. "I am finally being a sister." I took a deep breath. "This is my fault, Ebony. All of it. I created this monster standing in front of me. I yielded to you for years. I let you have the best seat at the table. I let you take the credit for my work. I cleaned up your messes. I paid your bills. I taught you that you could treat people like dirt and still get rewarded." I shook my head. "I loved you too much to let you fail, and in doing so, I ruined you. I made you think the world owed you something just for existing. But the world doesn't work like that, and neither do I. Not anymore." I stepped around her. "Where are you going?" she screamed, turning to follow me. "I am going home," I said. "But you have to help me." "What am I supposed to do? I have no job. I have no degree. I have nothing." "Then I suggest you grow up," I called back over my shoulder. "Get a job, Ebony. Wait tables, scrub floors, learn what it feels like to earn $1 instead of demanding one. Pay your own rent. It is time for you to become an adult." I reached the truck. It was parked under a fluorescent light that hummed loudly. Ebony followed me, still crying, still begging. "You are going to leave in that," she scoffed, trying one last time to belittle me. "That piece of junk. You are a multimillionaire now, Jasmine. You look ridiculous driving a garbage truck." I stopped at the driver's side door. I ran my hand along the matte black finish. "You really do not see it, do you?" I asked. "See what?" she spat. "It is a Ford. It smells like grease." I pointed to the small silver cobra emblem on the side panel. "This is not just a Ford, Ebony. This is a Shelby F-150 Super Snake. It has 750 horsepower. It is a limited edition. There are only 100 of them in the world." I saw the confusion on her face. She didn't speak car, but she spoke money. "Dante bought this 3 years ago," I explained. "He modified the engine himself. This truck is worth $150,000. Ebony's eyes went wide. She looked at the truck again. Suddenly, it didn't look like junk to her. It looked like a pile of cash on wheels. 150, she whispered. I opened the door and climbed up into the cab. The leather seat hugged me. I felt safe. I felt powerful. "It was never a piece of junk, Ebony," I said, looking down at her from the driver's seat. "You just never bothered to look past the dirt to see the value. Just like you never looked past Dante's clothes. And just like you never looked past me." I shut the door. The sound was solid, heavy, and final. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a deep, aggressive thunder that echoed off the concrete walls of the parking garage, drowning out Ebony's voice. She flinched, stepping back, covering her ears. I shifted into gear. I did not look at her again. I pressed the gas pedal, and the truck surged forward. I drove up the ramp toward the sunlight, leaving my sister standing alone in the cold gray dark of the underground, crying over a life she had thrown away with both hands. 30 days is a long time when you are waiting for a check, but it is a very short time when you are waiting for an eviction. The month flew by in a blur of legal paperwork and quiet mornings. The deadline came and went. No wire transfer of $3 million arrived. No miracle happened. I did not go to the house to watch them leave. I did not need to see the moving trucks or the tears. Mr. Sterling handled it all. He told me that the sheriff had arrived at 9:00 a.m. sharp. He told me that my mother had tried to barricade herself in the master bedroom, screaming that she was the lady of the house, until the deputies gently but firmly escorted her out. Now, as I drive past the neighborhood on my way to the site, I see the sign. It is a tasteful wooden sign hanging from a post in the manicured lawn. "For sale, by owner." The house stands empty, its windows dark. It is just a pile of bricks now. Without my family's pretense filling it, it looks almost small. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that my parents moved into a two-bedroom apartment in a complex on the outskirts of the city. It is old. The carpets are stained. My mother refuses to leave the apartment because she is afraid someone she knows might see her. My father has taken a job as a greeter at a hardware store to supplement their social security. He looks tired, but I hear he is quieter now, less angry. Perhaps the silence is good for him. Preston is currently out on bail, awaiting trial for embezzlement and fraud. The district attorney is not offering a plea deal. He is looking at 10 years in federal prison. His name is Mud in the tech world. And Ebony, my golden sister. The last I heard, she found a job. She is working as a hostess at a chain restaurant near the mall. She has to wear a uniform with a name tag. She has to smile at customers who don't care who she is. She has been blocked by all her friends on social media after the scandal broke. She is learning day by day that the world does not owe her a living. Maybe, just maybe, this is the best thing that ever happened to her. But I do not spend much time thinking about them. I am too busy. I parked the truck on the gravel road and stepped out into the warm afternoon sun. The air smelled of freshly turned earth and blooming jasmine. I stood in the middle of a 10-acre plot of land that used to be an abandoned industrial lot. Now it was transformed. Construction crews were grading the soil. Landscape architects were planting rows of oak trees. In the center, the foundation was being poured for a community center that would teach engineering and mechanics to underprivileged youth. I walked over to the large wooden sign that had just been erected at the entrance. The Dante Reynolds Memorial Park and Community Center. I ran my fingers over his name. This was his money. This was his legacy. He wasn't hoarding it. He was planting it. I walked back to the truck to grab my water bottle. As I opened the center console, my hand brushed against something stuck in the back of the compartment. It was an envelope. It was old, slightly crinkled, with my name written on the front in Dante's messy, distinctive scrawl. My heart stopped. I sat on the edge of the driver's seat, my hands trembling as I opened it. It was a letter. He must have hidden it there months ago, knowing that I was the only one who ever drove the truck, and knowing that I only cleaned it out thoroughly once a year. I unfolded the paper. My dearest Jazz, it read. If you are reading this, it means I have gone on ahead of you. I know you are sad. I know you are scared. But I need you to listen to me. I wiped a tear from the page before it could smear the ink. I know your family makes you feel small. I know they make you feel like you are not enough. I have watched them chip away at your spirit for 10 years, and it broke my heart every single day. But I also watched you rise. I watched you be kind when they were cruel. I watched you work hard when they were lazy. You are the strongest woman I know. Do not let them break you, Jazz, and do not let them change you. You have a fire in you that they cannot understand. I left everything to you, not just because I love you, but because I trust you. I trust you to build a life that makes you happy. I trust you to find the freedom you deserve. Do not grieve for me too long. Look at the sky. Look at the trees. I am there. And remember, don't be sad that your family doesn't love you the way you need. I love you enough for the whole world. Love always, Dante. I pressed the letter to my chest. I sat there in the quiet cab of the truck and I cried. But they were not tears of pain. They were tears of release. He was right. He had loved me enough to fill every empty space my parents had left. He had loved me enough to shield me even from beyond the grave. I looked out at the green field, at the workers building the future, at the blue sky stretching endlessly above. They say that blood is thicker than water. They say that family is everything. But I have learned the truth. Family is not the DNA you share. Family is not the people who sit at your table and drink your wine while mocking your life. Family are the people who stand with you in the rain when everyone else has run for cover. Family are the people who see your worth when you cannot see it yourself. Family are the people who leave you secret letters in old trucks just to remind you that you are loved. Dante is gone. My parents are gone from my life. My sister is a stranger. But as I sit here watching the sun set over the park that bears his name, I know one thing for certain. I am not alone. I am surrounded by his love. I am surrounded by my own strength. And for the first time in my life, I am truly, completely free. Have you ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to love you to save yourself? Have you ever found family in unexpected places? Tell me your story in the comments below, because your story matters, and you are never as alone as you think you are.